Hey everybody, hope everybody's doing good. Anyway, today's video is on how to make a big, massive steak cheaply. We're gonna cheat. I mean, let's face it, you go buy a steak, you go buy that nice ribeye, and it's $25 or $30 or even more. Anyway, chuck roast is cheap. And if you find one that's marbled and everything, it'll be nice and tender. You just got to cook it a long time. That's why pot roast is that you use a chuck roast to make a pot roast. But it also, if you do it right, you can make a good steak. And that's where sous vide comes in, because I don't want to overcook it. I don't want it falling apart. I want it to be that nice medium rare, but with a good long cook in the water bath, it'll be tender. And we're going to season it lightly, and then we're going to make a gravy, and it's going to be absolutely delicious. And it's going to be like a steak for 2 or 3 or 4. Now look at this. Look at this. We got some marbling. It's not a fatty cut of meat. It's nice and marbled, just like a steak. I mean, a steak is just a big cut of meat. It's a big hunk of meat. That's all it is. I've got some sea salt. You don't have to worry about getting it on both sides because we're going to do a long cook. This is actually for tomorrow. You want to cook this for at least 12 hours. That way it breaks down the tissue in the meat. Black pepper. So we're just going to keep it simple. Salt and black pepper. So we have our steak in the bag. Now we got to seal it. Before I put it in there, I make sure that I don't have a bunch of liquid draining off the meat, because I don't want it to make a mess. I want to make sure I get a good seal. All right. So it's time to put our steak in the water bath. I'm using a Sous Vide Supreme today. I'm going to set my temperature. I'm going to put it for 130 degrees F, because I'm shooting for a medium rare. And trust me, at 130 degrees F for 12 hours, any bacteria or anything will be killed, and this steak will be safe to eat. So anyway, put this in our water bath. Now I'll probably come back later and I'll put something in here to keep it from floating, because on these long cooks, everything tends to want to float up. And so I'll bring something in here and I'll put it in here, weight it down. There we go. That'll work. That'll keep my meat under the water level. And in here tomorrow, whenever we get ready to eat, it'll be ready to go. So next day, our steak is almost done. So we're gonna need to make some sauce. It's actually, as far as I'm concerned, it's gravy. But what's the difference between steak sauce and steak gravy? It's about 20 bucks in a restaurant. Anyway, I've got some shallots here, some mushrooms, and we're gonna chop all this up. And here's what our steak looks like now. Yeah, it's pretty ugly, but now we've got all this liquid in the bag. And what I want to do is I'm going to use that for making my sauce. I'm taking all the liquid from the bag. Half a cup of red wine. Now that's a red wine that you're willing to drink, not just some cooking wine. Although I consider this cooking wine. Yeah, you never want to cook with a wine you wouldn't want to drink. Now we're going to need to put some black pepper in here. I'm not going to salt it now. It's got some salt from whenever we salted the steak. And after this cooks down, then I'll test it at that point and see if it needs salt. Because if I put salt on it now and I cook this down and it's too salty, then that's not going to be a good thing. So anyway, we need to reduce this down quite a bit. At least half, but I really want to cook it down until there's only about 1/3 of the liquid left. You do want to keep an eye on your pan, especially at first, because all the proteins and everything in there is going to want to try to boil over. And we don't really want that, because then it makes a mess on the stove. Anyway, I'm going to move this over to the simmering burner and continue to reduce over here. All right, I'm gonna start working on my mushrooms and shallots. We'll put some oil in the pan. I'm using 3 tablespoons of oil. I don't need that much to cook the onions and shallots. This is also going to go for making my roux. Put our shallots in there and our mushrooms, dump it all in. Now we're going to put a little salt in here. Need sea salt. That'll help break everything down, get it cooked. Now our onions and shallots are getting just a little bit of brown color on them. We're going to put in 2 tablespoons of flour. And we're going to turn this heat down a little bit, and we're going to put some color on this flour. I know that's not traditional French, but it's more Cajun. Okay, so now my flour's browned up a little bit. It's starting to smell nutty. I mean, it does lose thickening power, but it gets that nice flavor. I could put a little more flour in there to increase the thickening power, but I don't really need that. Now, I want to take and I want to strain my juices. I don't want to pour it directly in there because there's stuff that'll clump up, and I don't want that. Give this a stir. Now I've got some water standing by in case I need some. Yep, I'm going to need some water. Not a lot. Now as this has come back up to a boil, this is the good time to taste it, see if you need extra salt or black pepper or anything. A little thyme or something would be nice in here, but I don't have any today. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I want to just keep this hot and let it just kind of keep going a little bit. So I'm going to put it back here on my simmering burner and just let it go. So I need the griddle, I need it hot, and I need the steak dry. That's going to help me get my brown color on it. Something about the Menard reaction or something. So anyway. So now, should have a good crust. We're going to flip it over. That looks a little better than it did before. We're going to give a nice crust on this side also. And on my sauce, I'm going to put about a tablespoon of butter, cold butter. Depending on how thick it was, it determined if I wanted 1 or 2 tablespoons. We're going to let that butter melt into that pan. So let's go to work on our steak. We're going to get it ready for serving. We're going to put this off to the side. Now look at that. That looks pretty darn good to me. I mean, if you went to a steak restaurant and they brought that out and you didn't know it was chuck sirloin, I'm pretty sure you'd be happy with it. So anyway, let's see what we got going on inside. Look at that. Now, see which way the grain is running. Looks like the grain's running this way. So that means I cut this way. You always want to make that last cut against the grain. Now, doesn't that steak look pretty? We need some of our gravy. Put that right down the middle, just like that. So as we always ask, how does it taste? And of course, is it tender? Because sirloin, chuck sirloin, you don't normally cook it as a steak because it's tough. Guys, that's not fall apart tender. but it is tender and it's beefy. That is steakhouse good.